In this video, I want to check out 15 different variations of a sneaker that completely changed the game, the original Air Max, which today is called the Air Max One. That shoe is famous for being the first shoe ever to feature visible Nike Air. It first came out in 1987, was designed by Tinker Hatfield, and his inspiration was the George Pompidou Center. It was important to Tinker that the first Air Max be in red because he wanted it to be striking and he wanted people to look right at it and notice the cool innovation of visible air. So I decided to break out 15 different varieties of red Air Max 1s, and I want to walk you through them, starting with an OG pair that came out in 1988. Come on over here and let's check them out. Now I know the original Air Max came out in '87, but I don't have a brand new pair of those in the box, so the pair from '88 will have to do. But for the most part, the shoes are very much the same, with the exception of the blue accents that you see on this pair from '88. You've got these blue eyelets right here, blue underneath the tongue, says Nike Air in blue back here, and then on the tongue, the swoosh is in blue. Those would not have been featured on the 1987 pair, but other than that, the shoes are pretty much the same. You'll notice the bright red swoosh, the mesh upper, and the bright red going all the way around the shoe. That is so striking, and back in that era of the 1980s, sneakers were not bright and vibrant like this, so you really looked at this shoe. And Tinker wanted you to do that to see this big innovation, which was visible Nike Air. He was inspired by the George Pompidou Center, which is bright and at some points clear and see-through, so you could see some of the technology in that building, and that's why he chose a bright sneaker, and that's why he made the air bubble see-through. That visible air made its way over to Nike basketball the next year in 1988 with the Air Revolution and with the Air Jordan 3, and forever the game has been changed with that technology. Let's move from this OG pair from 1988 to this pair that came out in the history of Air Pack. I want you to notice the tongues. You'll notice that the tongue of this shoe comes to a stitched seam, and that's very similar to the OG pair right here. After this pair of retros, Nike sort of abandoned that type of tongue in favor of a plush, pillowy tongue. But the tongue on this pair from the history of Air Pack is most like the original pair. Let's have a look at this beautiful shoe, made in '05, released in '06 as part of the celebration of the Air Max 360. When that shoe first came out, Nike released 8 pairs of shoes, including this one. It was these, the Air Max 90, the 180, the 93, which is the Air Max 270, the 95, the 97, the 03, and then the 360. And those shoes are as close to the OGs as possible. This shoe was only $80, believe it or not. Shows how much times have changed. With the inflation calculator, that's $93 by today's standards, and there's no pairs of cool Air Maxes that are anywhere close to $93 these days. You'll notice the mesh upper with the gray suede, the red everywhere. Beautiful, beautiful shoe. From this pair in '05, let's work our way to an '06 NL Premium. NL stands for no liner. That means that the shoes have no liner in them. Have a look right there. You can see that it's like deconstructed, very thin shoe. This shoe is the Clot Kiss of Death edition. It was owned by DJ AM. You can see back here is the DJ AM certificate of authenticity. This shoe was inspired by Chinese medicine. It's deep red with the swoosh made of snakeskin and the tongue made of snakeskin. You'll notice some of these cool ostrich accents along the back. And one of the coolest features, of course, is that the shoe is transparent. Let's remove this cardboard right here. And those are going to be pressure points on the insole right here because the shoe was inspired by Chinese medicine. Very, very cool shoe. Let's work our way to the next pair of Air Max One Quick Strikes from 2009. These shoes hit the outlets. Actually, they hit the outlets at a time when I was banned from shopping at Nike. And I used to sneak into the stores because I couldn't stay away. And they had these at the Nike outlet in Las Vegas for $69.99. And I needed to buy 2 pairs. So I put on a hat and sunglasses. And I was so nervous, I thought they were going to recognize me and throw me out of the store. Of course, they had no idea who I was, and I was able to buy my 2 pairs of shoes. But it's crazy to think that this pair in OG colors hit the outlets. Have a look, though, at the tongue. Remember we were talking about how they abandoned that stitched tongue in favor of this plush, pillowy one? I'll grab this over here so you can compare the History of Air edition with the '09 Quick Strike. Along with this pair of '09 Quick Strikes, Nike also released the shoe in blue, and those also hit the outlets. Just crazy. Another pair of Air Max 1s from 2009 are these, and it's actually the Air Maxim one. This shoe is compatible with your iPod, believe it or not. Check this out. You got this Nike Plus brochure right here. There's a little chip that you can put inside underneath the insole of the shoe, and it would make it so when you were working out and wearing an iPod Nano, the iPod Nano would tell you about your workout. It's sort of outdated technology nowadays, but it's cool to have these as a part of the Air Max family. So this shoe, when it came out, inspired me to build the ShoeZeum. I was in New York at 21 Mercer, and this shoe just released, and they had this exhibit where they were comparing this Air Max 1 with the Air Maxim 1. And they were highlighting some of the differences, which include the flywire upper, the iPod compatibility, this translucent-like material on the upper. There's actually more air in the Air Maxim 1 than there is in the Air Max 1. But I was looking at this exhibit, and I felt like they really didn't do the Air Max 1 justice. For example, the Air Max 1 originally released as part of a pack with the Air Safari and the Air Trainer 1, and there were no mention of either of those two shoes in the exhibit at 21 Mercer. And I was looking at this exhibit and I was thinking, man, like I could do better. I could build a better exhibition that shows the evolution of the Air Max 1 into the Air Maxim 1, and I went back to San Diego and went to work. But you can see that this shoe has sort of yellowed over time. I don't care that it's going bad. It's so special to me because it's really like a reminder in time for me of the big inspiration of, hey, I could build a Nike shoe museum and I could do it even better than Nike. Let's move from 2009 and have a look at this 2010 pair from the Air Attack Pack, all red, baby, and all nylon. Something that's very striking about this pair of shoes is actually the red visible air window. That wasn't featured on the original Air Max. In fact, it wasn't until the Air Max 93 that Nike started coloring in the air bubbles. But on this shoe, which is all red, they went with an all red air bubble. In 2010, in the springtime, they released the Air Attack Pack. It was a whole bunch of iconic shoes in crazy wild colors, and this is one of the coolest from the pack. There's an amazing commercial called The Secret Behind Nike Air. I recommend checking it out. It says basically that the air that's in these shoes comes from Nike athletes. From this pair of shoes, I want to show you another pair of 2009s. These are the Air Max One Premium Sps. They're sort of a hybrid of the Air Safari and the Air Max 1. And you'll notice it's got this safari-like upper. The colorway on the box is carrot, so I had fake carrots on display with these shoes. But this was a part of that exhibit where I was saying, hey, the Air Max 1 was a part of a pack with the Air Safari and the Air Trainer 1, and then this was included as a hybrid of the Air Max 1 and that Air Safari. Very cool, clean-looking shoe. I love it. What can I say? Let's have a look at the next pair right here, the Air Max 1 OG, and boy, have I got a lot to say about this pair of shoes. So this shoe came out as a part of a pack with three other shoes that were called OGs, the Infrared 90s, the Cool Gray 95s, and the 3M 97s. For some reason, they made the Infrared 90s look very vintage and yellowed, but they didn't do that with any of the other shoes. They put these OG Air Maxes in this box, which is like an OG box from the early 70s. But of course, we know that the Air Max didn't come out until 1987, so it's not really accurate. Then also, you'll notice that the tongue is wrong. It's got that pillow-like plush tongue. We've already seen that it's supposed to come to a stitched seam. Down here, they made the air bubble red, which wasn't accurate. Remember that the visible air wasn't colored until the Air Max 93. And it's like, if you're going to call a shoe OG, you ought to make it as close to the OG as possible. And I don't know how they can miss so many of those things. And then if you're going to make it a part of a pack with other OG shoes, why make one of them look vintage and OG and the other three not? But anyway, when this shoe came out in 2013, it was released alongside these engineered mesh shoes. They made the same four shoes, the Air Max 1, the Infrared 90, the Cool Gray Neon 95, and the 3M 97 in this new engineered mesh material. I'm not such a fan of it, but I wanted to have the shoes just to be complete and have all of the different versions of Air Max 1s, or at least as many as I could get my hands on. There are other white and red Air Max 1s in addition to just these 15 pairs that we're looking at today. But anyway, you'll notice that this engineered mesh is tighter in parts, looser in parts. Some parts it's more durable, some parts it's more breathable. You'll also notice that they went with that red air bubble. That's something that they've been sticking with lately, is making the air bubbles red, even though the original ones didn't have that. From the engineered mesh, let's look at another shoe that came out in 2013. These are the Pimentos. That's the colorway on the box. That's pepper. It's also stuffed in olives from time to time. I like to think of these shoes, though, as the Raging Bulls, in honor of the Raging Bull Air Jordan 5s. They're red suede, just like the Toro Bravo Raging Bull 5s. But also, you'll recall that that pack of 5s featured two pairs of shoes, the red suede and then the black 3M. And the swoosh on this shoe is actually black 3M. So this is sort of a combination of the two Air Jordan 5s that were the Raging Bull pack. Interestingly, these were also released alongside another pair of suede Air Max One Premiums, and they were black and anthracite. So I like to think of these as the Raging Bulls, even though some people call them the Pimentos. These also hit the outlets. They've got another red air bubble. It's crazy to think that this shoe just a couple of years ago didn't sell. And I remember Sneaker Steel tweeting it over and over. They're at the outlets, $59.99, $49.99, $39.99. If this shoe came out nowadays in 2015, they'd call it the Raging Bull and it would sell out in 2 seconds. Let's work our way to the next pair of shoes, the Tape Pack Quick Strikes. It's got that tape-like construction, very seamless upper, very, very lightweight. This shoe also came out with the same pack of shoes. It was like the big four for a while, the Air Max 1, the Infrared 90, the Cool Gray Neon 95, and the 3M 97s. And they would come out with them in OG and engineered mesh as a part of the tape pack. They also did Hyperfuse versions, but for some reason they skipped the Air Max 1. But anyway, this is the one from the premium tape pack. Pretty cool looking shoe, nice, clean, sleek. Let's work our way to the next shoe, the Air Max Day, another premium quick strike. This pair of shoes released on Air Max Day in 2014. You'll notice the Volt midsole, also the Volt inner lining, Volt lace tips on the extra pair. Those are probably the most distinguishing feature on this pair of shoes, other than the date on the tongue, 3/26, that's Air Max Day. These shoes are awesome. They sold out at pre-order, they sold out online, they sold out in stores, but enough of this general version. Let's have a look at this one right here. One of my favorite shoes in the collection. It's the Air Max Day in an air bubble, one of just 5 shoes. These were given out at Undefeated as a part of a contest, and this pair is actually autographed by Tinker Hatfield. Have a look right there. What a gorgeous, amazing mantelpiece. And look at how cool his signature is. When you look closely at it, the K goes through the rest of his name and it becomes part of the E, the R, the H, the A, so on and so forth. What a cool signature. When I think of Nike in the 70s, I think of the waffle. And when I think of Nike in the 80s, I think of Air. I have Bill Bowerman's waffle and I have Tinker Hatfield's Air right here. So I just love this shoe. Let's keep on going. Here's another pair of Air Max One Lunar ones. These came out not too long ago. They actually look a lot like the tape pack. I'll grab that tape shoe and we'll bring it over here and sort of stack them on top of each other. They're both sort of seamless, minimal stitching, very lightweight. Of course, on the Lunar one, they added this lunar midsole, and you can see it says Lunarlon right here. That innovation came from NASA, first got started in 2008. This shoe is so lightweight. Of course, they also went with the red air bubble on the Lunar. And then the last pair, the most recent one to come out, is the Air Max One Ultra Moir. And there you have it, perforated. It's actually 3M and metallic, so if the light hits it just right, it flashes and it's super cool. The Moire was one of the first shoes ever to be compatible with your iPod. So here we go back to this brochure that came out with the Maxim. The first 2 shoes that were compatible with iPods was the Moire and the Nike Zoom Plus. So kind of cool that we're ending with a shoe that we talked about the inspiration way back in 2009 with those Maxims, but that first Nike Plus came out in 2006, which is when the original Zoom Moire came out. Like I said, it's got this perforated upper. Again, they stuck with the red air bubble. Something cool about this shoe, and by the way, it's very lightweight, is also the visible air goes underneath the shoe. It's the only one of all of these that has visible air that you can see underneath. And that innovation didn't come out until the Air 180 back in the day. Anyway, it's been a real pleasure walking you through 15 different variations of red Air Max 1s. Happy Air Max Day.